If you have trouble getting a D&D group to show up consistently, if all your sessions die on the vine, this video is for you. My name's Xenia. I'm a dungeon master with more than 15 years of experience with campaigns that tend to run between 6 months to 2 years. This is going to be the first post in a little series I'm going to do with advice for DMs and players alike to solve common problems. These are just my opinions, so don't come for me in the comments. So my first tip is to curate good people, and you might have to do this over years, but it's so worth thinking about and doing consciously. So basically what I mean by this is keep an eye out for toxic players, players who constantly bring fights to the table, who insist on always stealing the spotlight, on people who want to steal from the other players, who won't listen to feedback. Anyone who brings a toxic energy, who you find yourself complaining about after session every week, those people, it's okay to break up with them. Alternatively, keep your eye out for the good players, the ones who you look out the window waiting for to show up because you know that they're going to make or break a session. You know that their presence is going to heighten the role play, their combat goes quickly, maybe they bring snacks. Keep an eye out for them and do whatever you can to keep them in the party because they will elevate the experience of not just you, but the other players as well. Tip number 4 is to prioritize your fun. Your players' fun, very important, very good, but it doesn't run without you. And if you're not having fun, the sessions will grind to a halt. They'll stop eventually because prepping becomes a chore and it gets done less and less and less well. And if you're not excited, it shows. It comes through in the gameplay and your players will lose interest. So prioritize your fun. If you started a campaign with a horror vibe and you're just not feeling it anymore and you're like, oh, I'd really love to do Vikings actually, it's okay to pivot the story. Find a reason that your horror campaign is now about Vikings, and that's all right. Because if you're having fun, your players are much more likely to as well. Obviously, you need to still be on their team. Your fun can't just be stomping them into the ground every time because that's not fun for them, and really it doesn't progress the game. But keep track of how you're feeling. Is your gameplay and your prep lighting you up? Are you getting excited for your weekly sessions or are you dragging? Is it pulling at you? If you're like, oh God, not this again, then you're probably running the wrong campaign. So prioritize your fun. Follow your joy. And when I say prioritize your fun, I don't necessarily mean above your players, but ensure that your fun is a priority. Tip 3, and this is especially true for new dungeon masters, and that is ask for feedback. And not just once. Every session, at the end of session, say, hey guys, is there anything I could do to improve? Don't say, did you have fun? Because they're going to say yes. No yes or no questions. Say, what can I do to improve? What could have made this game better for you? What would have been more fun? Where could I have improved? And by phrasing it as open-ended questions, you're more likely to get candid responses. And as long as you don't get defensive and you take the criticism as constructive, sometimes it'll open your eyes to things you didn't even know you were doing, or things where you're like, oh, wow, yeah, no, that would be way better. I hadn't thought about doing it that way. And so asking for feedback is huge. And that goes hand in hand with tip number 2, which is to give feedback to your players. If you have a player who's doing stupendously, tell them, say, hey, I really love the way you role played that, or wow, your Scottish accent is phenomenal. Thank you for bringing that to the table. Or I noticed that you gave up your spotlight so and so could take the wheel because this makes more sense for her character. Great job. Thank you so much for doing that. It makes the game stronger. And recognize those people and reinforce those behaviors. Likewise, if you have toxic people at your table who are maybe they're great personalities, they're wonderful friends, but they're doing something that makes people uncomfortable or that detracts from gameplay. I know one that has happened in several of my groups is players who steal from other members of the party or who do friendly fire on their teams. And some parties are okay with that. And other times you take them aside and say, hey, I get that that's what your character would do, but here's a challenge for you. Figure out why they aren't doing it in this specific situation. What is it about this team that makes it so your character isn't doing that? Because it's detracting from everybody else's fun. This is a team game. Everyone needs to have fun. And how can we together work towards that goal? The last tip, and this is the one that's worked best for me, is consistency. Most groups that I see that don't work out, it's because they can't pick a day or a time that works for everyone, because we're adults, we all have busy schedules. Or even more frequently is you arrange a time and a day, and then, hey, Tim couldn't make it, so we canceled. And the next week, oh, Jessica's away, and so we canceled. And it keeps going like that ad nauseum, and then eventually the campaign dies. So my tip is simply run anyway. Pick a time, pick a place, pick a date, and it is always at that time, at that place, at that date. And it has to be a pretty darn good excuse if you as the dungeon master aren't going to run. Like, you have to be quite ill and things like that. And make it a rare thing for session not to run. If Tim or Jessica can't show up, sorry Tim, sorry Jessica, we're running without you. And just adjust your campaign, adjust your sessions, take a monster out, adjust the difficulty down a bit for a few less players, but keep running. In my groups, I have groups of anywhere from 5 to 7 people, depending on the time, and we'll run as long as we have at least 3 players. So things have to go very bad. We'll cancel or we'll go online if it snows really hard. If something goes wrong with the prep, or they suddenly go, we want to go try to kill this dragon, and I have no prep for it, then okay, we're still meeting. We're still going to be at the place at the time. You are staying trained, but we're going to play some board games. We're going to do something else. But that's okay, because you're at the same place, same time. And by doing this, you tell your players that it is a priority. Your game is a priority. And that if they don't respect that priority, they don't get to play. And obviously things comes up. Life comes up. So you have to have some leeway. But have a number in mind. Say if they miss 7 sessions out of 10. Then you have to take them aside and say, hey, I've noticed that you've missed 7 sessions out of 10. That's kind of a problem. Is there anything I can do to help? Is this maybe a good time to open up a seat for someone else? And just see if you can't work it out as adults of, hey, this doesn't work for me. I'm the dungeon master. It's got to work for me. How can we make this work? How can we make this happen or not happen? How do we say goodbye briefly? And remember, breaking up with someone as a D&D player doesn't mean breaking up with them as a friend. Anyway, those are my tips. Those are my pointers. I hope you find them helpful. And stay tuned for the rest of this series with things like how to find people to play D&D with if you haven't just got a ready group of friends, and tips on how to keep a D&D group from the player's perspective as well. Happy gaming!